not sure if I'll ever believe anyone ever again when they say trust the science, because what they really mean, as Dr. Fauci showed us, is what they mean is trust me. I am the physical, corporeal representative of all science. And to disagree with me is not just to be politically different or have a different opinion, it's to be unscientific. We heard a lot of that during the COVID years. And I think the same sort of hocus pocus science is at play with the theory of man-made global warming. Just like there were strange rules about how COVID, well, here's an example. Remember when you would go into a restaurant and you could take off your mask when you were sitting down, but if you stood up, you had to put your mask on because the virus knew if you were standing or sitting. Same thing on an airplane. You had to wear your mask, except for if you were having peanuts or coffee or water, then the virus knew not to attack you. Well, that same sort of fuzzy thinking is for global warming science. Here's what I mean. Global warming is such a menace. Carbon dioxide is so dangerous that we have to tax you at the gas pump. But, and this is the science part here, we have to tax you a different amount in Quebec than if you're in another province, say Alberta. It's like those funny COVID rules. Carbon dioxide is different in Quebec, and it reacts differently to different tax rates. If you think I'm kidding, well, our next guest has a press release on this subject that explains the math, not the so-called science. I'm talking about my friend Franco Terrazzano with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco, I'm not sure if my analogy worked perfectly, but I think it does. People who say the science says we have to levy this tax on you when you fill up at a gas pump. Oh, but that amount is different province to province. That doesn't sound very science-y. That sounds very political to me. Tell me about your latest press release.
Well, you don't need to be a scientist to know that carbon taxes don't work. And look, here is the latest proof that Trudeau's carbon tax was all about politics, not about the environment. So here's what we found. Starting next year, every single province but one will have to pay Trudeau's higher carbon tax rate. And which province is the one province that won't be paying as high of a carbon tax rate? You guessed it, It's Quebec. So next year, every single province will have to pay a carbon tax that's 14 cents per liter of gasoline. That's the Trudeau government's mandatory minimum carbon tax. Every province but Quebec, because in Quebec, their requirement is that the carbon tax stays above 5 cents per liter of gas. So you have Trudeau giving Quebec a special deal on carbon tax and giving taxpayers in every other part of Canada, every other province, higher gas prices and higher home heating bills.
Well, help me understand. I mean, first of all, this is shocking but not surprising, if you get me. It's the audacity of it. It's like those COVID rules that only apply, when you're not drinking water or eating peanuts on the plane. But what was the so-called explanation? How do they finesse this? For these people are so terrified of global warming, they think we're all going to die, but they're not terrified enough to give Quebec a break. Why? If they were here right now, they'd say, oh, no. Franco, you don't understand. The reason we're doing this for Quebec is what? How would they fill in that blank? How would they try and explain this favoritism? Is carbon dioxide different in Quebec? Would they try and make a scientific argument? What would they say to justify this?
Ezra, the politicians haven't given any explanation. No. They're trying to sweep this under the rug. I bet you they want Canadians not to know about this special deal. So the politicians haven't given Canadians any explanation as to why Quebec is getting a special deal while everyone else is getting higher gas prices and heating bills. But, all those smart folks on Twitter, all those pundits, here's what I'm hearing from them. They're saying, well, Franco, don't you know Quebec has a cap and trade carbon tax scheme? Well, yes, we did know that. But you know who else has currently a cap and trade carbon tax scheme? Nova Scotia. And Nova Scotia is also reducing emissions. But that didn't matter for the Trudeau government because just last week, the Trudeau government said, it doesn't matter. You still have to pay our higher carbon tax rate beginning next year. So Nova Scotia has a very similar cap and trade carbon tax as Quebec, but it didn't matter for the Trudeau government the people in Nova Scotia are getting bullied into higher carbon taxes, while it certainly looks like Trudeau is playing favorites with Quebec.
And I think BC has a kind of cap and trade. At least I thought they did. And Alberta has its own industry kind of cap and trade, a special industry carbon tax. This whole thing is hocus pocus. It really is the opposite of science. And the fact that, for example, Alberta's massive forest, the Canada's massive boreal forests, which are a huge carbon absorber. Again, I'm playing into their hands by pretending that there's some science here, but obviously Canada's enormous number of trees absorbs so much of the world's carbon. But that pretends that there's science here, just like the COVID crazy rules pretended that there was science there. I don't know. I'm excited that you discovered this. How did you find it? Where did you find the revelation that Quebecers will pay really 1/3 the amount that the rest of the country? Where was that buried?
Well, it's mostly just because this is something that the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is always following.
Mhm.
I mean, we're hammering the government about its economically painful carbon tax all the time.
What you just saw was an excerpt from my nightly show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every weekday, I do a monologue. Usually it's about half an hour. Then I interview an interesting guest, and then we read my hate mail or my fan mail, whichever is more fun. It's only available behind a paywall, though. That's how we pay our bills here at Rebel News. We don't take a dime from Justin Trudeau. But the good news is it's only $8 a month, about half the price of Netflix. And in addition to my nightly show, you also get weekly shows from 4 other friends here at Rebel News. So you're getting 36 shows a month just for $8. I think it's worth it. And even if you're not quite sure, do it anyways, because we rely on viewers like you to keep us free and independent. I promise you I'll never take a dime from Trudeau. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com and click subscribe. Thanks.